Welcome to 30 Days of Horror Halloween, movie reviews, retrospectives, and this is video number 1 of 30 days. Now I was trying to figure out where should I start. So I think where I should start is the franchise that is the first horror film that I've ever seen, vivid memory, and instead of doing a movie, I'm going to do the series, and that's A Nightmare on Elm Street. So, A Nightmare on Elm Street, I saw the very first one when I was about 4. My parents rented it, and I snuck into the hallway, and all I remember is seeing Freddy run down the alleyway. Now, the Nightmare on Elm Street series is pretty scary for, like, little kids, and as I've grown up, there's been, like, this dichotomy where I try and look at the franchise as a whole instead of separating it. And I think that's the best way to look at any franchise. So, my first review, I'm going to go through and I'm going to talk about all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. The good points, the bad points. Of course, we start at the beginning. Wes Craven did the original Nightmare on Elm Street. 1984 is when it all started. And at the time, the whole landscape of horror was a lot of slashers, a lot of supernatural stuff. But it was the first to really accompany dreams to what you would entail a horror film. And this really is something that has resonated with fans over the years and really pulled people in. And part of that's Robert Englund. Robert Englund is a great character actor, which I think is what rings true throughout the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, which is probably part of the reason why when they did the remake, it didn't work that well. So the original one, the core basis is Freddy Krueger was a child molester who was burnt by the parents because he got off on a technicality, and he comes back to haunt the people in the dreams. And you don't get a lot of backstory until the later entries, but they really glossed over it because at the time when Wes Craven wrote the script, he was unaware that a trial was about to take place that dealt with a child murderer. Now, most people will remember the fact that he had the glove, the one-handed glove with the razors on it. But one thing to remember about the original is the original film, there was very few remarks, comments. The first one has like this sense of gothic horror just running through it. You got Nancy in there, who is like the primary character in the whole film, and her group of friends are really trying to just survive. The original film has a lot of cool scenes going through it. Tina and Glenn have two of the most iconic deaths in all of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and they're both in the first film. Tina's death of being cut and pulled across the ceiling as the room rotates is very iconic. And while Rod's death kind of always rubbed me the wrong way, because everybody else, both the girls, you get to see what they're dreaming, but for some reason the males, you don't get to see what they're dreaming about, almost like they're not important, which is a completely weird dichotomy in the first film. And as the movie goes, you actually get to. The reason I like the first one is it really is a tale of how distant parents are and how they will ignore everything that's going on. And a lot of the imagery that are in there, Tina with the centipedes and the millipedes and the bugs coming out of her mouth as she's in a body bag dragging across the ground. There's a scene where Freddy's like almost looks like he's trying to pierce through into the real world, but the wall is a barricade between Nancy and the real world. And of course, there's so much. Glenn's death is like iconic. It put Johnny Depp on the map, and people still talk about Glenn being sucked into the bed. All these years later, they used about 500 gallons of fake blood. And ironically, the whole movie actually takes place is a dream, because Nancy dreams about everything that's going to happen, but she can't stop anything that's going to happen. And that's very interesting. What's also interesting is the character, the doctor that's doing the dream study on Nancy in the hospital, is actually the guy who's the voice of Roger Rabbit. Weird twist. So, the original Nightmare on Elm Street is really good. Good scare tactics. Has the whole booby trap thing, which is in nearly every single Wes Craven movie. He has booby traps of some sort. And then we move on to the second one. Now the second one is Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, which people either love it or they hate it. I love it. I think it's funny. What's really weird is there is so many gay overtones in this movie. At one point it was voted the most homoerotic horror film of all time. There's in the closet, it says there's a pro video game. There's signs saying no girls allowed. He goes to a dominatrix club. People getting hit with balls in the face. There's so much in there, and what's really weird is the actor that plays Jesse was actually gay. But he did not come out. He was not out yet. So, the second one's kind of different because it tells a story of 5 years later. Nancy doesn't live there anymore, but this new family moves in, and Freddy, like, harnesses Jesse, like, using Jesse as a vessel to kill. Which I always thought that was interesting. It's also the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie I ever owned on VHS, so I watched it a lot. I like a lot of the imagery in the movie, and I like the opening. The opening I always thought was really cool. And, like, there's this essence of Freddy that's just looming over the whole movie. But the dreams aren't what kills people in that one. And that's what kind of rubs people the wrong way. You got Jesse killing his teacher, Grady, his best friend. There's like this thing where this bird like bursts into flames, which is really weird. And Freddy actually, the transformation scene that's actually in there where Freddy comes out of Jesse, coming out, get it? Funny, haha. Like the blades come out of his fingers and it like rips through his chest, and Freddy comes out and kills Grady. And I've always thought it was a good film, and it's almost like Jesse's trying to become... Jesse has to find true love in order to beat Freddy, and that's kind of the the thing I got from the film. So some people don't like it, some people don't. But then you have the next one. The one that everybody loves. Me included. A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. This movie is fucking fantastic. You have all these people that have a joint vision of Freddy, and Freddy is the reason why they've attempted to commit suicide, to try and get away from Freddy, try everything they can not to dream. In here you got Lawrence Fishburne in there. Early Lawrence Fishburne in this movie. You got Patricia Arquette's in this movie as well. You got Nancy returning, as well as John Saxon returning as her dad. And there's this group therapy, and they're all trying to figure out what's going on. And the kids are like, it's Freddy, it's Freddy, it's Freddy. And they don't, all the people in there don't believe it, but Nancy does. Because Nancy was there. And what's really cool is Patricia Arquette's character has this ability to pull people into the dreams, which is a really cool ability. And everybody that's in there has abilities when they're in the dreams. There's the kid that's in a wheelchair has the ability to walk and use magic when he's in the dreams. You got Taryn, who's able to, she says, I'm beautiful and I'm bad. And the third one is the one that has like very iconic stuff in there. There's the giant Freddy worm that picks up Patricia Arquette and throws her on the ground. There's Kincaid. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is the puppet scene, where Freddy is like a claymation puppet, jumps down, and he cuts open Kincaid, I think it's Kincaid, one of the kids, and like uses his veins to pull him like a puppet. And the scene is just done so fucking well that it's really good. You also have, Freddy is really comical in this one, but he's not super comical yet. So he'll have one of the most famous lines in Nightmare on Elm Street and all of them, "Welcome to Primetime, bitch," as the girl's like putting out cigarettes in her arms so she can't fall asleep, and she gets picked up by the TV and thrown in there. That's really cool. And you really have a great storytelling, and you get more backstory about Freddy being the son of 1,000 maniacs. He was a bastard. Really the core basis of where Freddy came from, a lot of it comes out in part 3. So for the backstory, you have 3. And they all do the whole thing, save the day. Now for part 4, before I go to part 4, part 3 is where they killed off Nancy. Freddy kills her because he takes the form of her dad and tricks her. And you have the surviving cast members. Part 4 is the Dream Master, which is my favorite in the series. Now, the Dream Master has Alice, who I think is one of the most interesting characters in a horror film, because she really truly goes from, in most movies you always have a character arc, and in most of the times in horror films you don't have that. But in this one you have a true blue character arc. She starts from being a quiet little mousy character and arches all the way up towards the end. Now, one thing they couldn't do is, because Patricia Arquette was a bigger star now, they replaced her with Tuesday Knight, who was a musician, and they used her in this movie, and it didn't feel right. But one of the most interesting scenes is the Fred resurrection scene. So the surviving characters keep having these dreams and going back to the boiler room, saying the boiler room is cold. You keep messing with him, he'll be resurrected. So the scene involves Kincaid, who has a dog named Jason. And if you've seen the movie, you know where I'm going. So the dog's name is Jason. They go to a wrecking yard, which is where they buried Freddy in part 3. So, in order for Freddy to be resurrected, the dog Jason pisses fire on his grave. Which, then you see all of Freddy's bones come back together, all the muscles come in, and then the skin, and then poof, his eyes show up. awesome resurrection, but I think it's funny that Jason resurrects Freddy. I always found that was funny. I bet you they put that in just as a joke. Just as a joke. But it was a really cool joke. And then from there they kill off the characters from the third film pretty quick. It goes boom, 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 boom. Pretty quick they get killed off. And with every death, Alice gets more strength. And she's a dreamer, because the reason why she becomes more powerful is the real world is so hard for her that she really loves being in the dream world. It makes her feel like she's worth something. So with every death, she goes into the dream world. There's a girl who has an asthma attack, but really Freddy sucks the life out of her, which is the first time that I believe a black chick was actually in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And then you have the Muscles Up girl who gets turned into a roach, and this is where Freddy starts to do the comical stuff where he says, "The Roach Motel, you can check in but you can't check out." And then her brother, actually, you don't see Freddy in that whole scene, so it's kind of a cop-out. Like, he dies, but all you see is the glove. And her and Dan get closer and closer, and Dan's like this muscled-up football player that she kind of has a crush on, and they get closer and closer together. And as it goes, there's this car accident, and there's a scene where he just yells Krueger, and Freddy just yells, "Well, it ain't Dr. Seuss," which is actually funny. There's even a fight scene at the end, and at the end of the movie they try and do this whole fight scene, and they try and use because throughout the movie there's been this Dream Master thing, and Alice keeps doing things that other people do. With its working out, she almost smokes a cigarette because that's what one of the characters did. So, but at the end she does this little thing, and she uses a mirror, and when Freddy sees himself in the mirror, all these hands start coming out of his body to try and pull him in. So that one was another good entry in the series. But Dream Child, which is part 5, it kind of got loose, I think. They tried to do a thing where Alice got pregnant, and Freddy is actually using the baby's dreams, because babies dream constantly when they're in the womb. So he's using that as a way to go and feed off the baby, and he starts to turn into a weird zombie baby. And there's a lot of cool effects in that one, but I think they try and do the whole thing where, Alice is going to be an unfit mother, so they want to, when she has the baby, they want to take the baby away from her, and it's Alice is starting to lose her mind, lose her sense of reality, and you get more of this one's more for the backstory-esque, and you really get a sense of they really wanted to put gothic imagery in this, but they should have chose to do it in a different film that was not a Nightmare on Elm Street. So it was okay, but it kind of dropped off. I'm not a big fan of Dream Master. I'm also not a big fan of the next one, which is A Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy's Dead. The Final Nightmare. Which was not the final nightmare. But they really try to emphasize, well, one thing, they threw everything out the fucking window. Everybody that's in this movie hasn't been in any of the other movies. They don't explain what happened to Alice. It's weird later down the road where all the kids are missing, and they just, you got Tom Arnold in there, Roseanne, Alice Cooper, You got a Goo Goo Dolls song for the beginning, and this one really, they just went batshit crazy with some of the lines. There's like this weird Bugs Bunny thing going on. They built this movie that has a 3D effect at the end, but they tried to build up that Freddy had a daughter. He had a kid. Like, he had a kid, and the whole movie you're trying to figure out who it is, and then you find out he had a daughter, and it's just, the movie felt really lame, because they tried to build off video game stuff. He even uses the freaking Power Glove in the movie. They really tried a lot of different things. Like, there's this whole, you put on the 3D glasses when she puts on the glasses, and then you go into this world and you get to see, this is, Freddy was assaulted, and that's what, abused, and that's what made Freddy Freddy. I didn't care for it, and that happened in 1990, and it didn't have, and then Freddy was kind of dormant, and then in 1993, they released Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which was one of the most original movies in the series. Wes Craven's New Nightmare is basically what would happen if the stories that they've been telling in the movies is to keep this Freddy in the movies so he doesn't get loose into reality. And the Freddy that's actually the real Freddy is even more vicious and violent than what we saw before. And the look for Freddy in this one is awesome. I love the bone glove with the blades. And what they did is they took key scenes that you would remember from the other ones. There's a truck scene which is an homage to Part 5. The bedroom scene with Tina, they do in a hospital room. It's a very good one, and there's not a lot of funny stuff, because Wes Craven did this one, and he wanted to make it as scary as possible. And it was good, and it had a really good ending. And to me, it's a nightmare movie, but it's not a nightmare movie, because it kind of takes that reality twist, which is something he was tinkering with, because later on he would do Scream, and I think that's where he got the ideas from. From there, you have Freddy vs. Jason. Now, to me, Freddy vs. Jason is a horrible movie. Ronnie Yu ruined the Child's Play franchise, but also almost ruined this. So, in my opinion, I've always looked at Freddy vs. Jason as a Freddy film, because there's a lot of comedy, and it just, I hate it, because they basically ripped off the plot from Part 3, threw it into Freddy vs. Jason, and then just threw Jason in at the last minute. And it was pretty bad. I'm not going to give it that much time of day, because it's a shitty ass fucking movie. I've watched it a couple times. I'm not a big fan of it. And then you have the remake. Now, the remake really justified why you can't, in my opinion, you cannot do another Nightmare on Elm Street without Robert. And some of the biggest problems they had is they forgot about the ambiance, and they went for straight up scare with gore. And instead of, in the original, where they glossed over the whole pedophile, child murderer crap, this one, they actually embraced it, endorsed it, and they really brought it to the forefront. And these kids, don't remember that they went to school together, and that they were physically and sexually abused. And they really bring that out a lot. And I just don't think it was that good of a film. Robert Englund has gone on to say that it's not a very good horror film. It's not a very good Nightmare on Elm Street film. And as a whole, it's hard to even get through. So this is kind of in my retrospective review on the series. I think Nightmare on Elm Street is due for another sequel. What I would do is I would try and get Robert back. I would try and get Robert Englund back one more time. because fans would love it. There's a lot of hardcore Freddy fans out there, and I think they would really enjoy seeing a true blue good Nightmare on Elm Street film. So this is day 1 of 30 Days of Horror, and I will see you tomorrow for day 2.